Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barbin. Let's talk football.
Yeah, let's talk football. Oh, man, what a weekend.
That was a crazy weekend in college football.
You sent me a text message. It was funny because you said, well, there's a different game that we didn't have in our notes that we have to talk about. And I had no idea what you were talking about.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I didn't know. And then I obviously watched the replay of the Alabama Vandy game, and now I realize what game you're talking about. But at the time, I thought, man, what's he talking? What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I already have.
It just ended. It just ended. That's why I said it. Yeah.
Oh man! All right. Well, let's get to it. We're going to do our best ever and our worst ever from this weekend, and I don't.
And you know what would be best ever? What would be best ever is people liking the video and subscribing, please. That really helps out the channel.
Yeah, that would be the best ever. All right, so I'll get going here.
Sure.
Working backwards from 3 to 1. My third best ever is Ashton Jeanty. He just keeps going. I know I said this at the end. I said I'm kind of have eyes on this guy now as the Heisman non-quarterback with Travis Hunter leading Heisman candidate, and he did it again. He had over 180 something yards, 3 touchdowns. Did you even see the highlights of this?
Yeah, for those who aren't sure, like name the team and position this guy plays, just for in case the listeners don't know.
Running back, Boise State.
Yeah.
You got to at least watch the YouTube highlights of this guy. Even if you're not a Boise State fan, you just got to see the guy go. He's awesome. And he's just pulling away from people. He just, contact balance, all the stuff they say that a good running back has. He's got all of that, and he's got the breakaway speed. And he just seems to always stay on his feet past contact. And I mean, I think I said last episode, I'm already anticipating he's not going to get the Heisman love he deserves because he's not a quarterback and he's not on a power team in a power conference. And I said he's probably got to challenge Barry Sanders type Oklahoma State numbers, but I think he's on pace for that. I think he's absolutely on pace to get over 2,000 yards and get somewhere near Barry Sanders' actual numbers.
Yeah. No, and this is a good example. He's really good. And it's another case of it's going to him, right? So it's going to him and they still can't stop it, which is something. And Boise State's 4-1, and their only loss is to Oregon, which was 37-34, which is all of a sudden looking better now. That's a pretty good quality loss. So if they can run the table, they've got hopefully they may or may not have a ranked opponent against UNLV or any other ranked teams on the schedule. But, if that's going to be their only loss, they could be a high group of 5 team for them. No one's going to want to play them in the playoffs. So that's because of that running back. So that's
then the only other thing regarding the Heisman is that I'm pretty sure that's voted on before the playoffs, correct?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's in December, which has traditionally been before the playoffs, but this year
that will be before the playoffs here too.
Well, it might not be because
the playoffs are all in January. And what sucks is I've looked them all up. Enough of them that he's not going to be
last week of December, but I don't know when the actual vote is. Yeah,
but I guess what I'm trying to get at is he's not. If let's say they do make the playoffs and he puts up a huge number in the playoffs against a good team, I don't know that that'll have happened soon enough to account into his Heisman, into the calculus people use to vote for Heisman, which sucks because.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm projecting a future that hasn't happened yet. It's just he's this good. He needs to get some sort of accolades. He better win whatever the award is for best running back. I mean, there's just no way anyone's catching him now. Anyway, so that's my third best ever. He's if you're not going to watch Boise, at least watch the YouTube short highlights of. You got to see this guy.
Yeah, no, he's the real deal. Okay, so my number 3 best ever is the Arkansas defense. That was they did a really good job stomping Tennessee, essentially. The speed that offense plays at and the fact they can run the ball that well and pass it is I've never seen them have struggle against the defense this much as I did against this one. And Arkansas, that was a team that, I don't want to say they didn't have anything to play for, but they got up for this game, and it easily could have been mailing it in time, and they absolutely did not do that. So that was I didn't think we were going to see such a handcuffs put on an offense as we did this week with Arkansas. And if I had to guess the team that was going to be stomping Tennessee, I wouldn't have put any money on Arkansas. So hats off to them for doing that.
They actually have a decent record now. Well, they only have one loss. And the
Uh,
loss was a terrible one to like Oklahoma State. Like, how did they lose that?
yeah, Oklahoma State, they lost 39-31, and they've also lost to Texas A&M.
Oh, right, right,
So,
right,
but that
right.
was last week. But it was,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's just I couldn't believe, and they went through two quarterbacks, right? Or they were using two quarterbacks in that game too. Arkansas, like their starter got hit pretty hard at some point in the game. I just couldn't when Tennessee came out and scored two touchdowns right away in the in the third quarter. I thought, okay, here we go. This is Tennessee exerting themselves. But in the first half, Arkansas totally controlled the game, but it didn't reflect on the scoreboard. It
no,
was whatever it was, 3-0, but
yeah.
the yards were heavily in Arkansas's favor. But good for them for having the resilience to withstand the Tennessee's coming out and putting up two quick touchdowns in the third. And then I thought, okay, here it goes. This is it. And no, Arkansas just hung in there and they just looked like the better team.
Yeah, and you're right. Taylon Green's the starting QB. He went 19 for 27 for 266 yards, but Malachi Singleton went 2 for 3 for 31 yards, but also had 4 rushes for 12 yards and a
Yeah.
TD. So they definitely played both. Yeah, it's the first time Nico's looked like a freshman, I would say. Like it was 17 of 29 for 148 yards, no interceptions, but it was they were pretty limited. So
yeah, no, that was obviously one of the major upsets this weekend. Okay,
yeah.
so my second best ever is Washington beating Michigan. That was not. I thought Michigan would handle them, but I think now
We both did.
Yeah, I think now a team finally dealt with Michigan defensively the way they should have the whole game.
Yep.
And Orgy is terrible. He can't complete a pass to save his life.
Got benched.
He got benched. Tuttle came in, and they kind of like looked a little better when Tuttle came in. Now, it wasn't really because Tuttle's good. It was because the running back was just going off.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow Washington held that surge Michigan had after Tuttle came in, and a couple of brutal turnovers. And to me, the story of this game is Michigan has no quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It was the quarterback play that failed them with critical interception, like fumbles. They just doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. That position is so weak on this team. And even as good as their running backs played, and they played good this game, it wasn't enough to overcome the weakness at quarterback. So they've been doing it with smoke and mirrors all year. They should have lost to USC. They should have lost to Minnesota, and finally it caught up. So my note here is that their quarterback room finally caught up with them. And the Washington team and coach was smart enough to force them to make the quarterback win with their arm, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah. So, and it was hats off to both coaches in this game too, because both coaches went to another quarterback at some point, So, and the freshman for Washington looks like he's going to be pretty good too. He was really fast. So, but yeah, no, listen, Washington was slightly favored going into the game, but they took care of business at home, which is, not everyone can say that after this weekend. So it was, there was a good environment and they played well. And once you're right, like they forced Michigan to beat them not running, which was going to be impossible to do.
Yep. And Michigan put up a good fight, even knowing they're just going to have to run right at a team that's trying to stop the run. So Michigan's run game is good, but not good enough to overcome bad quarterback play. I got to put Washington's home field atmosphere in my top 5, maybe. It's when Washington is good.
Yeah.
An afternoon game there looks better than almost anywhere. It just looks amazing.
No, and with being on the water and the boats and they have a quality Husky mascot doesn't hurt either.
That stadium with the view of the water, that's got to be one that if it's not the only one, it must, to me, it seems like the nicest looking setting of all.
Yeah.
Like that just looks so good.
It's up there.
Oh yeah. Anyways, maybe a destination thing one of these days. All right. So what's your number 2?
All right. Number 2 best thing I saw the NCAA this weekend is going to be Kyle McCord, quarterback for Syracuse. That was when people at Ohio State wanted him out. And even though he didn't play that poorly last year, and it seemed like he was relegated to Syracuse, like this is going to be a major step down. And all he's done is average over 300 yards a game with a good completion rate, getting over 3 touchdowns a game. And, hats off to them for making something out of this that no one was really looking at, and I'm so impressed with them and the with the orange. They have that one loss to Stanford, but they've got a lot of winnable games left on the schedule. They've got NC State and Pitt and Vautech and Boston College and like UConn. Like there's and then they have what seems to be could be the most important game of the year in the ACC is going to be the Syracuse Miami game, the last game of the season. So which is nuts to think about, but either them or SMU perhaps. But yeah, no, hats off to Kyle McCord, and they look great. And that was at UNLV. That was and UNLV was rolling, with their switch to the quarterback, and that was going to be a tough win, but they did it. They did it and it's off his arm, and that was great.
Totally, that was an awesome game. Both quarterbacks look good. I mean, Haj Malik is awesome. That's, I mean, he looks like could be better than the guy he replaced. It's just, that was an awesome game to watch. I think they put up a stat saying McCord's leading the country in average yards per game. If not, if it's still if he maintained that, or if he dropped a little bit, either way, going into that game,
he's not leading in yards because there's another team Miami's played 6 games and they played 5, but I think you're right. I think
average yards per game.
Yeah, average per game. I think you're right. I think he's one of the top.
My other note during that game was Kyle McCord has an NFL delivery. Just when the way he like fires the ball, like the short but powerful release, I just thought, oh, that's an NFL arm. It's just what it looks like. So people who's not watching Syracuse should get eyes on it, because he's good. He's really good. And it's shocking to me that they couldn't make that work at Ohio State. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand how that turns out, that you let a guy go who looks this good. So maybe it took him a year to develop, and his rookie year he wasn't going to look this good. I mean, they obviously won a lot of games with him, but he looks really good. All right. So my number one best ever thing I saw was Minnesota. They took down USC. USC's offense is USC's offense, but then Minnesota found a way to like throw some sand in the gears of that offense. And for stretches of that game, this is almost a half best ever, half worst ever.
I was gonna say you're like that with Michigan too.
Well, I gotta try to talk about both teams. There's too many teams to talk about, but okay. So let's give Minnesota their flowers first. First of all, they took down USC, which is a ranked team with a really good offense. They should have beat Michigan. So Minnesota should be up there in the Big Ten right now. That is a tough team. They got PJ Flex got his attitude and his personality all over that team. And that team should be 2 ranked wins that they have right now. So if they can keep this up, they're going to take down a bunch of Big Ten teams if Minnesota keeps playing like this. And so that's Minnesota's flowers. And on the other side, USC's 2023 defense showed up for stretches of this game.
Oh my goodness.
Where they were missing tackle after tackle. Like the Minnesota running backs were going through 3 and 4 or 5 tackles, getting to the last man on the defense. And I was like, oh no, here's the USC 2023 defense, where most of this year they weren't looking this weak, but it showed up. And I remember thinking, I think it was at half, it was maybe 17-10 in favor of USC. And I thought, man, that's deceiving, because the defense is not tackling well. They're almost doing a bit of red zone roulette, and Minnesota would sputter out, but good for Minnesota, because then I thought, okay, so they've weathered the storm. USC will finish this game off, but no, Minnesota got it. So they're putting together a strong season, maybe more than people would expect, and I think they'd be more on the radar if they did take down Michigan, which they should have. So, so Minnesota.
Yeah, and they have a opening first game of the season loss to North Carolina, which looks really bad now, but it's clear that they just hadn't hit their stride yet, because it looks like a different team against Michigan and USC. And they've got you got a good point. They got some winnable games left up on the schedule. So they're going to be playing UCLA, Maryland, Rutgers, Wisconsin. All of them are unranked, still to come. So yeah, I think that's going to be another team that people aren't going to look forward to playing, because their running game is legit, and they're starting to put it together.
All right, what's the best thing you saw?
This one was tough. This snuck up on me. It wasn't on my list initially, and then it went to number 1. So I'm going to say the best thing I saw this weekend, it was Carson Beck's bounce back performance. The Georgia was, supposed to be good. It's not a surprise they beat Auburn, but just coming off the loss last week to Alabama, he had 3 interceptions. The Auburn isn't terrific, but this was an important game for him to play well, especially because they're thinking much further past this game and into the postseason. So he went a very efficient 23 for 29 for 240 yards and 2 TDs, and that was is going to make Georgia fans feel a lot better. They've recovered nicely. This looked like the Georgia team that everyone thought that was going to be there. And so, that was taking care of business on a weekend where not every favorite team did. That was the best thing that they could have done this week.
Yeah, I'd say by halftime that game was giving Georgia fans some acid reflux, but in the second half they started putting it away. The one thing I did have in my notes is is Georgia going to play 4 full quarters?
Mm-hmm.
That I expected them to come out a little stronger than that in the first half. But again, we also discussed that against Auburn, weird things happen in this game, no matter how much of a gap there seems to be in the talent level or whatever the ranking might be. So when you put it that way, it was a pretty solid win. I don't know that you should expect Georgia to put up 55 points and hold Auburn to 10. I don't know if that's the sort of game you expect between them and Auburn.
Yeah.
But you're right. This was a good bounce back. It was a solid win, especially looking not mega sharp in the first half and then putting the game away, which is what you want to see them put the game away. Now, at some point they need to play 4 full quarters though.
Yeah, no, as a team, there's still some work to do, but Beck I felt was on point, which was that easily could have been it's sort of his first adversity that he's faced last week. And so, to handle this week, that was important.
Yeah. And then you're right. Beck looked good. I'm just speaking more of the whole team.
Yeah, no, you're right about the whole team.
Even their win against Clemson, that was about a half a game of a real performance there. And now the good thing for Georgia fans is Georgia turns it on in the second half, which is you don't want to look like Michigan where you start collapsing in the second half.
That to me is a good statement of the coaching, their second half adjustments and the way they look in the second half is almost always better, which is, again, you don't say that, that's great. You don't say that about a lot of teams. So that was, that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's a good, even against Kentucky, that scare, they still, it sputters and whatever, but at some point when it has to happen, they could have taken down Alabama too if it weren't for that one big long pass that Milroe hit. So, that's a good sign. It's a really good sign for Georgia that they turn it on in the second half. It's good. It's what you want to see. All right, moving on to worst ever.
What was your best ever?
Minnesota.
Oh, that was your first. Okay, sorry. That was number one. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, makes sense that you're like, wait, really, Minnesota? But okay.
No,
come on, man, they're good.
I
think I gave them some love on the helmet positioning back here.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
yeah, and that's a cool set. Oh, their uniforms were awesome.
Yes, very true.
Minnesota's
good uniform day overall.
This was a great uniform day.
That should have been this is my number 4 best ever from this week because the Louisville uniform was
I'll back you up on that one.
Yeah, and
Boise State going with the orange jersey. Minnesota's uniforms were outstanding.
Yeah, and then there was another one. Maybe it was Texas A&M, just all maroon against the all white was a pretty solid matchup too. Some of those games just looked fantastic with the uniform. And I love Washington's all purple. It's one of the best looks. Yeah. So I would have liked if they went with a chrome helmet. I like when they do that. I think they only pull that out later. But it was good. Yeah, bonus best ever.
Sticking on the uniform theme, did you watch the Oregon game and the uniform they were wearing for cancer support?
Yeah.
But did you see the story about what it was for?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. That was a really good story.
Yes.
And that they had they were calling it out with it was good that I like the fact
specific labels with the stomping out and stuff.
Stomping out cancer. I like the fact that the uniform's not just for fun, but it meant something.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, they were doing in some of the NFL stuff is the about catching cancer early was one of those things, which I know you also feel strongly about. So
for all you guys listening, I had cancer. I caught it early and got rid of it. So I'm all about supporting early cancer detection. All right. So moving on to worst ever.
Oh man.
Okay. You're not going to, I've been talking about this and I had to put it on the list.
Yeah.
Fox Sports play-by-play guys are so obnoxious.
Really? Oh, you're number 3.
I cannot. Oh. I had it at number 1 for a while, but it doesn't quite get enough. Given what happened this week, it can't go number 1. But this is an ongoing thing for me. Gus Johnson is so bad. And he tries to come up with nicknames for players that don't exist. Like last year, calling Marvin Harrison the Maserati. It's like, no one calls him that. You can't create a nickname if the team and the school hasn't nicknamed him themselves. You're not making up a nickname. And then talking about, I don't who it was, maybe the Penn State's coordinators, like, oh, he used to drive a Zamboni and now he's trying to smooth the ice out on the game. It's like, what are you talking about? He is awful, to the point where it almost ruins the game for me. Wow. He's that bad. And it's not the color guys.
Yeah.
It's the play. The thing is, it's not just Gus Johnson. I noticed it this week during the Boise game. And what else? And during the Iowa State game, whoever the Fox,
and those were all Fox games, right?
Yes, those are all Fox games. And whoever the play-by-play guy is, the guy who calls it like all the play, they do the Gus Johnson thing where they scream at the top of their lungs, their voice is cracking, they're all trying to come up with nicknames. So I'm wondering if it's a script they're being given, but it is awful. It makes these games, I almost want to just put it on mute because they're they almost ruin it for me. They're so bad. And same thing in the Iowa State game. He's trying to nickname the running back. I'm like, no, it's not. He doesn't have that nickname, and it's not going to catch on. Just call the game already. And CBS and ESPN, ABC across the board, play-by-play guys are outstanding. And Fox across the board, it's so bad. My only word for it is obnoxious. Like, just call the goddamn game.
Right. No, I hear you. And it's the two things that really strike me about that is when you go that over the top and when you're generating content yourself, which is what it is when you're coming up with new nicknames and stories or trying to smooth the ice stuff, you're making it about you versus the players or the game, which is you shouldn't do, because that's not why you're there, right? And the second thing is, one of the key things about calling a game or any kind of broadcasting is they always comment on letting the moment breathe, right? Like when something amazing is happening, just letting it go is a good thing, because then it really allows the momentum of it and the significance of it to land. And so when you're talking over it or yelling and coming up with other stuff, it does take something away from it, which you don't need to do, because like they're great games and great plays, and so it's I hear you at it's too much.
Letting it breathe is the exact opposite of what the Fox play-by-play guys do. They just overwhelm the show with their nonsense. I mean, God, it's awful. And on top of that, let me just rip on Fox a bit more. Their stupid graphic at the bottom of the screen that shows the score takes up a huge chunk of the screen.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's way too
It's not just the
tall
bottom line, like it's the whole corner. Yeah.
Like if you've got a receiver wide on the bottom, he's gone. Like you can't see him at all. And I can't believe somebody somewhere in a production meeting saying, hey, that graphic's kind of big. Do you notice we can't see the cornerback or the receiver at the bottom of the screen? What are we doing here? Why do you have to do that? It doesn't need to be. How long has football been on TV? The small, thin graphics, plenty. You don't need all of that nonsense. So Fox in general, broadcast, thumbs down, just terrible. All
right. So my number 3 worst thing that I saw this weekend, we touched on it already, was the Michigan pass offense. If they had, what was so frustrating about that is the defense looked really good. There's a couple of defensive backs that give up a little too much space, but other than that, their front 7 are excellent and their running backs are amazing. 20 and 7 are both very, very good. So it is so clear that if they just had a competent person, you don't have to throw for 300 yards. You just need to keep the defense honest with being able to complete a forward pass more than 3 yards, like 1 out of every other possession would be enough, to do that. And it was just really frustrating. They almost were off my list when they put in Tuttle, and he looked like it was competent. Then I don't know what happened, if he lost confidence or if the defense really made that much of a switch. It didn't look like they did, but he looked like how Orgy did at the beginning, which was just too fast. The defense is too fast for him, and it just wasn't enough to do it. And so it's just really frustrating for like that. For if you're a Michigan fan, to be coming off a national championship, and they still have it's a good team. Like, it's not like some of these other teams where it's like clear, like Florida State, where it's like clearly a wholesale change of personnel in key positions. Like, their defense is good, and if they just had a bit better quarterback play, they'd be undefeated. So it's that was tough to watch.
And they would look like a team that deserves to be in the conversation for the national championship. This team doesn't have it. And it must be frustrating for Michigan fans, because I'm sure after the coach left and a bunch of players left for the NFL, they must have thought, geez, like what do we really have to reload? And it looks like they could reload everywhere except quarterback, which is really just too bad, because I think the fans know. This is one thing, obviously being Florida alumni, we know what it's like for our team to be the best team in the country. And when anyone who's been a fan of a team that's won it all, now you have the memory and the proof of what a national championship team has, because you just saw it. I get it that we all see other teams that aren't our team win the national championship every year, but you're not so attached to that roster the way you are to your team. So when your team wins the national championship, you can think of all the players, all the starters on offense and defense. You can think of special teams players who like really contribute. You can even think of the depth chart, and you're like, oh, that's a national championship team. I just watched it. I had I was all over it all year. So I bet you the Michigan fans have that feeling right now. They remember a national championship caliber team. They just saw it, and they know everything about every player on that team and the depth chart. And now they're looking at this thinking, oh, this isn't last year's. Like I see all the pieces missing. Yeah. And so it's a bummer it's a catch-22. You just won the championship. So good for you. Your team's done it. Very few teams have ever done it. Like a lot of programs have never done it. But now you're stuck with the kind of like Thanos. You're cursed with knowledge. Like you just know now, what a national championship team is made of. And you're an expert now on what it is. And you kind of know if you don't have it.
Right. And the only option would be wiping out half the teams, the Big Ten, in order for make your team better. Is that what you're saying? No, never mind. That's not. Okay, you shouldn't do that.
No.
Okay, so wait, you're number 3. Have you done? You're okay. So you're number 2 now.
My number 2.
Perfect.
Ranked teams losing.
Category.
Hang on. Right. This kind of gives me leeway to talk about anything. But I also have in brackets fraudulently ranked.
Yes.
Question mark.
Okay.
And so for the fraudulently ranked teams, that would be the the Missouri Tigers.
Yes.
Who've lost their spot on the wall. They've been moved right out of camera view because they just don't deserve to be up there after that performance.
No.
Well, Tennessee, I don't know if I'm going to call Tennessee fraud per se, but if anyone's been watching us, you notice we never talk about rankings, because I think rankings are just nonsense and they just don't mean anything. And this is why. Look what happened to some of these top teams. Alabama lost, Tennessee lost, USC ranked 11th, they lost. Missouri ranked 9th. I think we all kind of suspected the Missouri's ranking, and I even called it a charity rank last year. Yeah. We kind of knew that was they didn't really deserve it. Miami should have lost. So we should have seen even more ranked teams lose this week. So it kind of rankings I don't think rankings matter. Well, we know who's good. Doesn't matter what the number next to them is. And
just to double down on that point. Okay. So, and just remember that how they've picked the playoffs every year up to this year was based on rankings, right? So this is a great example of like the rankings don't always translate to the best team, which is why at least this year having a conference champion being into the playoffs is super important, because at least you're not voting on rankings and stuff, which can clearly be wrong, as you said, right? And as my mentor, Dr. George, once said, when the playoffs up until this year, they weren't the playoffs, they should have called them what they were, which is an invitational. That's what it was, is you're getting an invite to something. Whether or not you deserved it or not isn't really part of the conversation, but it's clear, like your point is exactly right. Like this is what, like Missouri shouldn't have been in the top 10, so, and it's which is scary to think that if the playoffs started like, before this weekend, they would have been. Right. So that's disappointing.
Well, and that's why and also mid-season rankings are pointless early, or on any of these early rankings are pointless, because you're just going off of oh, who's returning and what does the team look like from last year, all that kind of nonsense. You don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know. So anyways, all of those ranked teams falling was, I guess it kind of puts it in perspective that the rankings just don't matter now. And the very, very end of the year is the only time they kind of matter. And at least this time around with the 12 teams, you earn your way in by winning a conference championship on part of it. And then the other part is invitational. The quote unquote at-larges are the invitational half. So you still have some of the invitational aspect, but at least you have some objective. Oh, we won our conference, we're in. At least
at least half of them being, or less, between a third and a half of being like the earning their way in is something, right?
I mean, I think they all sort of earn their way in, even if they're invited, but objectively, at least there's 4 or 5 that are objectively, we won our conference
champion, like gets you in, which
something's objective about it now.
Yeah.
So that's my number 2. What's your number 2?
Perfect. So, and I noticed in there you never talked about Alabama. Is that because that's
I mentioned it too. It too.
Okay, perfect. Yep. All right. So my number 2 worst thing I saw this weekend was teams that are ranked and lost, and the ones that really disappointed with me, which you just touched on, was USC and Missouri. Right, Missouri, like, it's one thing to be fraudulently ranked, which is what they were in the top 10, but it was also, it's how they lost. They looked overmatched the whole game. They looked like that they could not handle being on the road. They couldn't get the ball to their best player, the LB3 on the outside. The quarterback has been there a while. Like, this should not be, it's a tough road environment. It's high noon. It's not 8 p.m. in Death Valley, but it's high noon. Like, it should be manageable. And they didn't look like it at all, like the whole game, and they got blown out, and that just shouldn't. It's it's just disappointing how they lost, and it's same thing with USC. The part that was frustrating for me that we hadn't talked about yet was that it's the defensive tackling, like you said, right? Like, and they knew it was a problem last year, and I don't understand why it's like. I know it's hard to fix, but I just don't know. I can't believe it's not fixed yet. Like, these are good players, they're good recruits. Like, it's crazy to see them lose in that way when Minnesota doesn't have a dynamic passing offense. They're going to be running the ball, and they can't stop it. They couldn't stop it, and it's how and it's Minnesota. Like, it'd be one thing if you lose a game you shouldn't have, like in a ranked on ranked matchup, or in a poor, turnovers are always the ones that are super frustrating. But man, they were outplayed. They were outplayed, both of them, and it's like, that was crazy.
Do we want to expand the Alabama story?
That category? One's coming up for me.
Okay. I was going to say, because I kind of threw this one in there just in case. I'm assuming it was.
I got something specific I want to talk about now.
Okay, well, that'll just lead into the whole thing. All right, so I have number ones, which I know is just, now I'm making 4 categories, but I'll touch on one and then I'll maybe expand the other.
We got a 1A and a 1B. That's fine.
1A, Cal blowing the lead to Miami.
Ooh,
that game was awesome, and they just collapsed in the last maybe 4 minutes of the game. And the worst of all, they let Miami back into it where there's just a touchdown lead, or whatever it was, maybe a 6-point lead. And they pin them deep on a punt and immediately give up a 70-yard touchdown with Ward throwing it essentially out of his own end zone. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this game's over. Like, as soon as and it was just a blown coverage, and they were playing awesome defense all game long. And it just the utter collapse at the end of that game, specifically of the defense, which, I mean, the broadcast kept saying, oh, it's one of the best defenses, and it's the defense that failed. But just that 70-yard blown coverage, like, you pin them deep, it looks like, okay, you're going to force them to drive the field with flat out, whatever it was, a minute and a half left. Okay, maybe your defense can show that it belongs by holding this game. Your offense put up whatever it was, 35-something points. That's enough. You should win that game if you can put up that much on offense. And instead, your defense just completely collapses when it needs to show up, which was a complete bummer. I was all in on the upset. It looked awesome on TV that the Cal team was just playing good on all fronts until that drive was terrible. I'm sure you can say, oh, well, Miami had something to do with it. Yes and no. When you get 70 yards on a simple what looked like just under pattern. It wasn't even a long throw. I mean, on 70 yards, it was maybe less than 10 yards in the air and 60 yards running just because of flat out blown coverage. So, I mean, obviously the Miami players have to throw the ball, catch the ball, and run the 70 yards to make that play happen. But it's not like they schemed up an awesome play that should get you 70 yards. It was Cal failing in that moment, which was such a bummer because it was the stage was set for the next upset and Cal to really take the stage. And, you know, there was buzz about Cal with their funny memes, you know, that where they kind of self-deprecating humor in those memes that have been going viral. So the stage was set for Cal to kind of like join the national party, and they just kind of fell on their own face.
Yeah. So that was okay. So it's 38-18 in the fourth quarter. Right, that Cal's up. It's 20 points. If you remember the Patriots' massive comeback, it was 28-3, which is like 25 point, but it was 28-12 in the fourth quarter, right? So this is a bigger quarter than that, like point difference. And to come up with that, and the win probability thing on ESPN is hilarious because the line is just dribbling around 100% for Cal, and then there's just a straight line up to 100% to Miami when they score with 26 seconds left with the field goal, the touchdown, the 5-yard pass with
that's what I'm talking about.
Seconds to go.
It was awful.
That collapse is crazy. Now, what I will say this is my hope for Cal is that this has happened a couple times, right? Like with them this season, like they have been in games, and they absolutely could have beat Florida State, and they absolutely could have beat Miami, right? And they beat Auburn and San Diego State. So I think I'm going to chalk this up to being like I'm a young team, you know, maybe not used to winning, and I think that hopefully this will be good things for them, you know, down the road. But yeah, it felt like a collapse as opposed to an amazing comeback, right? And that's
absolutely
why
was a collapse.
And that's why it makes the worst list as opposed to the best list.
Exactly.
You know, you're right about that.
And so my number one is Iowa Hawkeyes offense.
Oh,
it is unwatchable.
Yeah.
And for the first, 15 minutes of that game, their defense was awesome.
Yep.
They were in it. They were picking him off. Like their secondary is good too.
Yep.
And then it's just so pathetic. Their offense is so unbelievably. But when is Ferentz they got to get rid of him. Like how can Iowa fans take this team seriously?
Wow.
This is how many years of like, does he just like actually resent or spite the idea of offense at all? Like what makes him think this is ever going to work the way he puts a team together? And I wouldn't be as frustrated with them if the defense wasn't so good. Like this is a national championship caliber defense basically every year. And what they were doing to Ohio State at the beginning of that game, if they had a competent offense, you're like, okay, so these are two of the best teams in the country. If the offense was competent, since the offense cannot do anything, the defense eventually just gets worn out. And then Ohio State had their way with them.
Yep.
But man,
it was 7-0 at the half. Right.
Yeah.
The defense is doing everything you're asking of them, but they can't play both sides of the ball. So
it's unbelievably bad.
Yeah.
It's just laughably bad. My notes just said laughably bad.
They had 226 total yards of offense, but a lot of that came like to sort of the last drive of the game where they had a meaningless touchdown, right? It was a 28-yard run at the end. So like it would be under 200 yards of offense.
Maybe 150 and almost all of it just meaningless.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just too bad. It's just too bad. It's just the same old story. I'm just sick of it. It's just the same old story. And it's
really surprising that McCarthy hasn't made a difference. Like, you know, McNamara, that's what I meant.
No, but nobody makes a difference there. It doesn't matter who the coordinator is. To me,
well, I don't even think McCarthy would make a difference. I mean, as long as
whatever it is, it's somehow
if he came back from the NFL, he wouldn't make a difference.
It's a systemic thing coming from Ferentz. It's clear that it doesn't matter who the coordinator is.
Yeah,
there is a lack of attention, or just not whatever his philosophy is. It has nothing to do with the offense being competent at all.
No,
and it's pathetic. It's just pathetic. All right. That's my
All
number
right.
one.
So that was a good one. That's a good 1A and 1B. So my worst thing that I saw this weekend wasn't so much that Alabama lost, it was how player number 13 acted as the time ran out for Alabama. I want to get this name right. It was Malachi Moore, and it threw a little children's tantrum with the second last snap and just started waving his arms, and then he went up and he kicked the ball when the Vandy was going in for the victory formation, and it was so embarrassing to see that. Like it's the you gotta, yes, this is a huge upset, and yes, it's incredibly frustrating, but you got to handle it with more class than that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is football. It is a game. It's really important, but it's a game. And you got to lose with class and you win with class. And that guy did not have it. And that is, I would bench that player for the next game. And that is because that is, again, this is something we've talked about in our thing before. What people talk about with football is that it's a good training for life and becoming, upstanding men going forward. And so to have that outburst at the end, so you got beat, and it is a huge upset, but you got to, take it on the chin. You got to go to the post game press the Alabama coach has to go to a post game press conference just like everybody else, and you just got to take it. So that was just, it's embarrassing. Like, they're better than that. You don't have to do that. And it was
a sore loser, petulant little brat.
Yes, exactly.
More.
Exactly.
That's pathetic.
It
Grow
is.
up. You think Saban would stand for that? This might be an indictment of Kalen DeBoer.
No, and that's the whole thing. Like, the point would be, it's like, we lost. What are we going to do about it? We're going to prepare better. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. And it's not that. It's just throwing a tantrum like you're a kid that didn't get the toy you wanted. And
that sums up that entire what I thought was going on in that game, and that kind of proves that Alabama went in there just thinking it was a foregone conclusion.
Yes.
And they
absolutely.
got physically dominated, utterly dominated. The time of possession was a joke.
Oh.
It was pathetic how bad they got beat. Like the number of first downs was like they doubled them up in first downs, doubled them up in time of possession. The only reason the stat sheet isn't even more embarrassing is because Milroe threw 2 or 3 bombs that made up about 150 yards of, or whatever, 100 yards of offense that those are just like 50-50 YOLO balls that they just happened to catch. And if they didn't do that, it would be even more lopsided, embarrassing stat sheet than it already was. I mean, they just got completely overwhelmed physically.
Yeah, it was the time of possession. It was 17:52 for Alabama, so almost 18 minutes to 42 minutes for Vandy. It's
double.
More than
How did
double.
You get doubled up?
Yeah.
They just looked like the unranked team getting steamrolled.
Yeah.
And then the other thing in that game, how many times did a Vandy guy lay a hit on a Bama guy who didn't get back up? They took the tight end right out of the game.
Yep.
And they did it to 2 or 3 other guys. They were cracking guys. Like, it was like somebody told Vandy, this is as many of their players as you can put out of the game, you're putting them out of the game. And they weren't dirty hits. There was a targeting that they thought was a targeting, but it wasn't. Yep. And they just came in, shoulder on the guy, and knocked him out. I don't know if you noticed, but he immediately went limp and dropped the ball for a moment there. They were doing that to them all game long. They just physically imposed their will. That's a bad look for Alabama. And then at the end of the game to have a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
No, that's an embarrassment. Alabama fans, you should be embarrassed for how your team didn't no-showed and then reacted to no-showing. It's just pathetic.
Yeah. And I always think too about, like, hats off to the Flowers, to the Vanderbilt coaching staff, right? Because it would have been, they know they're huge underdogs, right? They know that no one expects them to win. And it'd be really hard for players not to, like, feel that somewhat, like, going into the game. But hats off to them, because they came out ready to go. And like you said, it wasn't just a couple of lucky plays or something. Like, they out muscled them and out hustled them, which was just a
full on. They just kicked the shit out of them.
Yeah,
that wasn't luck. Exactly. They just kicked the shit out of them. That quarterback's awesome.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's quarterback's so much fun to watch.
16 for 20, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then he also had a bunch of running, was the 56 yards running for 20 carries.
The broadcast is like, it kind of looks a little bit like Manziel back there. It kind of does.
Yeah.
Did you see what the broadcast said about his? I don't know if it were his brothers or cousins, the two guys in his family.
Oh, they're in the stands.
Yeah, and then I guess whatever their jobs are, they kind of have a lot of downtime, so they just watch film and then just give him notes.
No way, really?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't
they're like, oh yeah, they spend all week watching film on the teams, and then they just kind of give me some notes. So he has his own research team. It's awesome.
That's great.
Anyways, that's. I mean, I was going to put the Bama thing somewhere in worst ever, best ever, but we obviously have to get to it.
It's just a sportsmanship by Malachi Moore. That's all that needed to be
just
talked about
terrible.
there.
You're right. He should get benched for that.
Yeah, like it's come on. It so clearly goes against what all the coaches say, like, you know, and all this student athlete stuff or paying for play and the name, image, and likeness and stuff. Like they always hold on to like we're here to, you know, we're give me your son and we're going to train them up and they're going to be excellent human beings and football players. Like they all say that. They all say that.
Yeah,
so
complete lack of emotional control. It's bad. All right, so I got a couple subcategories here, just little quick ones that we can mention here. So I got teams that now have to be on the radar. Starting with Iowa State, right? We got I don't know if you see that. We got Cy, the Cardinal Cyclone guy. So Iowa State 5-0. That's also in my top 5 college atmospheres. That place is, when they're good and that place is rocking, that's so much fun to watch. It's kind of reminds me of the what it's like a place you wouldn't think about, but South Carolina. Well, maybe South Carolina's more on the radar than Iowa State, but those are just
Ames, awesome. Iowa. It's a good call. Like not quite on the radar, but should be. So
should be. Yeah. Super fun to watch those games. Yeah. Texas A&M, that was a good win, and they stomped them. So they only have the one loss. So they're now all of a sudden should be on people's radar. I know
Iowa State. Oh no, Texas A&M.
No. I'm moving on to Texas A&M.
Sorry, just the last comment about Iowa State. I think that's a great call because they're undefeated so far. They've got some winnable games coming up. They got a West Virginia, UCF, Texas Tech, Kansas, Cincinnati, and then 2 good games at the end at Utah and then hosting Kansas State. So that's setting up to be like a really important last couple of Big 12 matchups there. At the end.
So they're moving themselves into pole position in the Big 12.
Yeah,
the scrappy Big 12.
Yes.
So moving on to A&M, good for them.
You're right.
A&M is now quietly, maybe not to A&M fans, but to the rest of the country, they're quietly in only got one loss, and they're in a good spot in the SEC right now.
Yeah, and Wigman looked good. He was close to making my best ever because he was the commentators were giving him a lot of love as well. But he looks like he was a big time recruit, and he looked like it on Saturday. Like it did. He's got a fantastic arm strength and is a good distributor of the ball. And that was what, if he's putting it together, then the rest of the team, they've got a good defense and good run game. Like you're not going to want to play them.
Yeah, they just overwhelmed them. Missouri had no business being on the field with them.
That potentially is going to be a really exciting last game of the season. It's going to be Texas A&M hosting Texas.
Yeah, that's starting to shape up like it's going to be a heavyweight battle there. My next one's Texas Tech. This week they actually played a bit of a scrappier game. It wasn't a track meet like I was expecting. So now they're showing that they can win different ways. So they have to be on the radar now for Big 12, Big 12 title game. And then you got something to say there? You want me to just move on?
No, keep going. Okay.
And SMU, they just keep winning. They just keep winning. Their offensive talent is awesome. So, I mean, they have some cracks sometimes on defense, but that offense is going to keep them in every game. So, first year in the ACC, they might challenge for the ACC title. So they look good too, and they have to be on people's radar now.
Yeah, and they had the Jennings and then the other. I think it was because he took over because Stone started, I think, the season, and then the Jennings is there now, and he had 21 for 27, 281 yards, and he also had 10 carries for 113. So that's it's the dual purpose quarterback and some good athletes on the outside and running backs and stuff, and the defense that can sort of bend but not break all the time. Like that's you're right there. That's
you know what it's like if people haven't watched the SMU game. It's a lot of big plays downfield that they both get but give up, but then they get a lot of negative plays against the other team. So they get a lot of tackles for losses against the other team, a lot of sacks, like just pushing the team backwards. It's kind of like extreme in both directions. So it's not they're not just hold on defense. They'll push the defense back 10 yards, but then give up 20, then push the defense back 20 yards. Like they're kind of, it's like havoc. It's just havoc all over the place with them. Even so, they're just fun. I don't know. To me, that's like a fun style of team to watch.
And really important point too is that they're in the ACC, and they don't get Miami or Clemson this year. So their rest of the games are like Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, Cal. Like they don't play Clemson or Miami. So there's a good chance like you could have a couple of ACC teams undefeated at the end, and then I don't know how they're going to decide who goes to the championship. But it's so that's they could be there late in the season. So
I'm expecting them to be at this point.
Yep.
I got one more category here. I'll say I'm continuing with my unexpected undefeateds. So Indiana holding serve. Now you can how about this? You can say Indiana holding serve. Isn't that awesome?
A good point.
And they just
not something in our lexicon before.
The offense is just rolling again.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who they play. The offense is just awesome. So they're
fewest amount of points they've scored all season is 31. That's the fewest.
Yeah.
So that's 77, 42, 52, 42, 41.
Well, obviously they're going to have tougher games ahead, but I think that offense is legit. But we'll find out. We'll find out when they start hitting some tougher defenses.
Yeah, they got the Nebraska and Washington coming up, but then they've got Michigan, Ohio State too on the schedule.
Yeah,
so
those are real defenses.
Yeah, but those will be good games.
Oh yeah,
they get Michigan at home. That's
my next unexpected undefeated is Pitt.
Yep.
So in our ACC talk, Pitt now is on the radar. If it wasn't already, has to be on the radar for being there at the end of for the ACC. And then my other two are Army and Navy.
Ooh,
I mean, they're both undefeated. I don't know if it's fully unexpected, but I guess I'm a little.
You could put that in the unexpected category. That no one. It's really rare when I think they flashed them in the last game. It's rare when like both of them are 5-0. It hasn't happened since the World War II.
So that's kind of all my notes that I had. Do you have any other notes?
No, that was it. It was a great Saturday, and it was just it was one of those weeks going into it. There was only one ranked matchup, but there's look out because the thing like a week like this could happen at any time in college football. So it was super entertaining.
It shows you how much the rankings don't matter.
Yeah, and it was a great weekend. Like it was a great awesome Saturday of games. So
I mean, I already know the NFL can't beat this.
Something amazing would have to happen, but
I don't know what could possibly happen.
No,
I guess we're just biased. I'm starting to think we have to actually view them as separate. I don't want to say separate sports,
separate entities. You're right.
Boy, are they ever different? Like
you're right. Yeah.
I thought about this in college because even with the 12-team playoff, you really can't afford more than a loss or two. Like that still holds. The regular season, the importance is still holds.
Yes.
And then the wild upsets that you like the Vanderbilt upset where they say they haven't beat Alabama in 40 years and then haven't beat a ranked team in 60 years or whatever, top 10 or whatever the number was. Like that's not a thing the NFL even can offer.
No.
The NFL cannot offer a gap or an upset that big. Let alone three of them in one day. It's just not a thing. The parity if you want to call parity in the NFL is such that you just can't say, you can't come up with a number saying, oh, the Bills haven't beat that team in 40 years. It's just not a thing. They've all beaten each other at some point, somewhat recently.
Yeah.
Or you also can never say in the NFL, oh, they overcame a 40-point spread. There's no such thing.
No,
right? Like a big spread in the NFL is like 7.5.
Yes.
So it's just maybe that's why. I mean, obviously we're biased towards the college. I mean, as much as I like the NFL, it's just all of this stuff with college, you just don't get these wild outcomes. And I think it's partly because of the expectation that then is not met. Like I just thought Bama would crush Vandy. So like while watching it go the other direction is just so much more interesting and shocking than watching the Carolina Panthers beat the Chiefs or something. It's like, they beat him, but it's not like this.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's something, and I love the history of it. That's a great point. It's the last time Vandy beat Bama was like 83 or 84, something like that, that's a long time ago, and the last time number one ranked team lost to an unranked team was 2021 when Alabama lost to Texas A&M. Do you remember where you were at that point?
No.
You and I were watching No Time to Die, the movie at the Orleans Casino, because we bet on that
Oh,
game and we wanted to stop watching it. So,
right,
and that was
right.
after playing golf the morning and telling everyone to bet on Alabama. So
Oh, I
that
do
was,
remember that part. Yeah.
so that
Sorry.
was, that's all good. So that was, but no, like that, there's nothing, you can't, those upsets are crazy. And you're right, nothing in the NFL can touch it. Like even if Carolina beats someone, they will beat someone this season, it'll be an upset, but like you said, the most it'll be is like 7 or 9 points, like not like 40 or whatever it was with the Bama, so
Yeah. Maybe our concept of rating what the leagues against each other is a little bit doesn't make sense because we're always going to pick college. But we'll see. We'll see if the NFL can ever compete. Like, I mean, we've
Bama
got
was favored 22.5, which is just a spread you don't see in the NFL.
You'll never see that in the NFL. All right. So that's it for our college reaction here to week 6. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we're going to do our reaction to the NFL. We'll see if we can hold up to this. All right. We'll catch you then.